name is Alejandra Bejarano, and I am a sales consultant at Mondragon Lingua. In my work, I talk with companies every day about how they use artificial intelligence in translation.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Tania Almada, and I am a project manager here at Mondragon Lingua. I work every day helping our clients by making sure that every step of the linguistic processes, from the presentation of a quote to the delivery of a final product, runs perfectly.
Okay, to get started, today we will talk about something you probably already use at work: artificial intelligence in translation. Here is how we will organize the session. First, we will look at some real examples from companies. Then we will talk about where the real risks are, what the different translation options are today, and what works well when AI is used as a part of a professional process. We will also dedicate a section to confidentiality and regulation, as these topics are becoming increasingly important, and we will leave time at the end for questions and share experience. Okay. To get started, more and more companies are using AI internally, and it makes sense. It is fast, easy to access, and it seems efficient. But here is something important. The question is no longer whether to use AI or not. The real question is, what kind of translation do you need in each case? What we see in many companies is that they use the same tool and the same process for everything, and that is where problems start. In fact, this is exactly why we organized this webinar. More and more companies send us AI translation to review, and we keep finding the same problems: errors in meaning, lack of terminological consistency, loss of context, content that sounds correct but is actually not accurate. And there's something very important here. In many cases, when clients already have translations memories available, it is more efficient and cost-effective to retranslate content using professional engines trained with those resources than to revise uncontrolled AI-generated translations. Why? Because by having a well-designed process, the engines feed from these translation memories, which are databases that grow with each collaboration between us and the client. Thus, by doing this, terminology is defined and the result is coherent. Plus, when you control the whole process, it's not just about translation anymore, but about keeping consistency a long time. Okay, we want to be clear in something. We are not against technology. We actually work with it every day. We test new tools with our technical team. We have helped develop neurotranslation engines, and we are not working on projects like Euscorpora to improve AI translation in the Basque language. Moreover, we build our own AI tools based on real needs. One example of this is Naya, a tool focused making language easier to understand. This solution was born from a real client need. One of our clients in Spain operated in a regulated sector, needed to comply with the European Accessibility Act, which requires content in areas like banking and insurance to be graded at a B2 level or lower. They started drafting new texts and manually editing existing ones, but the process quickly proved too costly and time-consuming. So they came to us directly and asked us to design a solution. That's exactly what we do. When our clients face a challenge where AI can add value, we work with them to build the right tool, well-trained, monitored, and guided by real language experts. In other words, we know how this works from the inside, and that is why we also know when it works and when it does not.
Thank you, Alejandra. Well, now let us begin with some real examples. They are very simple examples, but very revealing, actually. So first, we can have cases when AI interprets incorrectly. As some of you may know, Mexico is one of the host countries for the FIFA World Cup this year. And as part of their citywide renovations for the event, Mexico City's government translated the public transport signage into English. The sign that points towards one of the light rail stations reads light train in English. Now, in Spanish, light rail is tren ligero. When translated into English, they went with the literal word train for tren. So the key point is that when AI lacks sufficient context, it does not hesitate, it decides. And as a result, the meaning of the context can change completely. And passengers might think that Mexico has some sort of fluffy wagons or something like that. As a second example, we have biases. It is common knowledge that AI models reproduce biases. Biases related to race, socioeconomic status, and of course, gender. For languages that have gender markers, such as Spanish, AI often translates subjects as male or female, depending on, say, the career that is mentioned. For instance, it will translate nurse as enfermera, which is female in Spanish, and doctor as médico, which is male. The same will happen for teacher and professor, where the first one will be rendered as female and the second one as male. So clearly, AI translation needs the human touch, a highly socially conscious one for that matter, to wipe those biases off. Now, we can also talk about the not so uncommon chain effect of errors. In technical manuals, like the one that you have for your dishwasher but haven't probably read, it is common to receive content that has already been translated from Chinese into English before being translated into Spanish. The problem here is that the English version may already contain errors. In these situations, the translator is no longer simply translating. They must interpret, rely on images, use their technical expertise, and apply professional judgment. Now, this means more time, greater complexity, and a higher risk, and of course, a higher cost. So we can see that errors may not even begin in the language that is being translated, but they are being dragged from before. As a final example, I'd like to point out that reviewing AI-generated translations is not always the most efficient option. So one client decided to incorporate artificial intelligence into its internal processes, and they asked us to review the translations that they had generated. So the original idea seems simple, right? We will create a first draft with AI, and then you can review it. But in practice, something different happened. In order to guarantee quality, we actually had to review the entire content. We compare both scenarios, that is, reviewing every word of the AI-generated text versus creating a new translation using professional engines fed with translation memories and approved terminology. And the second option proved to be more efficient, more reliable, and in the end, more cost-effective. So the same lesson applies in all these cases. The problem is not artificial intelligence itself. The problem is using it without context, without control, and without a defined process.
Thank you, Tania. Okay, after seeing these examples, there is one recurring pattern. Decisions that appear harmless but can actually lead to significant risk. We often hear comments such as, it is only a quick draft, yet it might be the first impression a client has of your brand. It is only internal documentation. However, that content might later be reused externally without proper control. We will use AI first and review it later. In reality, there is often not enough time for a thorough review. It is a simple text, yet it might contain key terminology that cannot vary. The important idea is this. The greatest risk is not often found in complex content, but in content that appears safe and therefore goes unquestioned. Generative AI does not work exactly as many people think. It does not simply translate, it can interpret, summarize, and adjust the message, often without warning. In some contexts, that is not a minor error. It represents a loss of control over the content. Moreover, not all languages behave in the same way. AI output can be significantly different depending on the language part involved. Translating from English into Spanish is not the same as translating from English into Yoruba, for instance. In some cases, the result can be quite relatable, while in others, the margin of error increased considerably.
Thanks, Ali. So now let us break down the translation methods that we use. So the first one is human translation with revision, also known as translation plus review, okay? This first approach provides the highest level of control over the translated text. First, a professional translator with expertise in the relevant subject matter and context produces the translation. Afterwards, a second linguist, also specialized in the field, reviews the content to identify errors, inconsistencies, or possible improvements that may have been overlooked during the initial translation. After this review, we usually perform a quality assurance process. This is a very important part of the process. It involves checking for issues such as punctuation errors, incorrect terminology, formatting inconsistencies, and other potential problems before delivery. And the final delivery, therefore, provides a high level of quality and contextual accuracy. It's worth noting that this process, which is human translation with revision or human translation plus review, is the workflow covered by ISO 17100, which is the international standard for translation services. This method is recommended for things such as contracts, legal documentation, financial documents, user manuals and instructions, medical leaflets and prescriptions, medical reports, health and safety content, and pretty much any content that may directly affect a company's reputation or image, including even social media or web pages. Now, the second option that we have is human translation without revision. This approach may be suitable for content that is not business critical, such as news articles or certain internal communications that do not impact safety, compliance, or brand image. In this case, an expert translator completes the translation, after which the process moves directly to QA checks using specialized software. Unlike the previous method, there is no independent linguistic review by a second translator. After the QA checks are completed, the document is delivered. And here, I'd like to mention that for all types of translation projects, translation memories are either created or updated. And we will talk a little bit more about translation memories later on. Now, following human translation, the final option is machine translation with post-editing, known as MTPE. It is true that MTPE is generally the fastest translation option available, but it is important to understand the process behind it. First, the content is translated automatically. This can be done using traditional neural machine translation engines, which actually have been in use for years, such as Google Translate. Or it can also be done through generative AI systems, which have become increasingly popular in recent years. Now, neural machine translation engines tend to produce more literal translations. And because of their behavior, it is generally easier to predict how the final output will look. These systems often perform well, especially when translation memories or previously translated corpora are incorporated into the workflow. However, they can still make mistakes and may perform differently depending on the language pair involved. Generative AI, on the other hand, produces more natural sounding text and can adapt more efficiently to specific context because it considers the broader context surrounding the text rather than focusing only on individual words or sentences. Nonetheless, this flexibility comes with risks. Generative AI can introduce changes, invent information. We have all heard about AI hallucinations. It can adapt messages, and it can alter content in ways that were not intended, okay? And this is an important point. When a text is translated using generative AI, the result often sounds convincing and fluent. However, sounding convincing does not necessarily mean that the content is accurate. In fact, producing convincing text is exactly what generative AI is designed to do. Another aspect worth emphasizing is that using generative AI effectively for translation requires much more than simply entering a prompt such as translate this document. The quality of the output depends heavily on the instructions provided, the constraints established, and the level of guidance given to the system. As you can see in our workflow, machine translation is always followed by post-editing. This means that a professional linguist reviews the translated text to identify and correct any errors. Unfortunately, in an effort to reduce costs, organizations sometimes skip the stage. And in reality, doing so often creates more problems than it solves. A good example of this is the one about the translation of Tren Ligero into English that I mentioned earlier, which rendered the term as light train instead of light rail. Had this content undergone proper linguistic post-editing or even a proper QA, this mistake would likely have been detected. Instead, Mexico City's government had to withdraw the signage, recreate them, and absorb all the additional costs that were associated with the error. Now, following post-editing, another QA review is performed. And as discussed earlier, this step is designed to identify any remaining issues that may have escaped detection during previous stages. And the final stage is the delivery of the completed document. Although MTPE is generally faster than traditional human translation, it should only be used under appropriate circumstances. It's particularly suitable when delivery deadlines are tight, when budgets are limited, and above all, when the content is not business critical. And this point is essential. Even with carefully designed prompts, specialized glossaries, and translation memories, machine translation with post-editing is not suitable for every type of content. But as my colleague Alejandra mentioned earlier, we are not opposed to artificial intelligence. On the contrary, we work with it every day and continuously adapt our products and services to take advantage of technological developments. However, we strongly advocate for a professional approach. The AI tools used for translation must be properly configured. It's not enough to simply tell the system to translate a document. The solution must include project-specific prompts, customer-specific glossaries, and carefully defined terminology. All of these elements need to be configured in advance for each client and for each project. The terminology that is associated with a specific industry, organization, or project has to be made available to the AI system in the same way that it would be provided to a human translator, I'm sorry. And well, translation memories also play a critical role. Translation memories are repositories of previously translated and validated content that become part of a client's linguistic assets. Just as translation memories reduce cost and increase efficiency for human translators, they provide similar benefits for AI-assisted workflows. And more importantly, they help reduce errors because the system can leverage approved translations that have already been validated. But even with all these when all the stages have been completed, that is a properly configured tool, defined terminology, and available translation memories, a professional review by a human expert remains essential to prevent these kinds of errors that we described earlier. Now, I'd like to move on to another very important aspect. One of the questions that consistently arises when we discuss artificial intelligence is the matter of confidentiality. What happens when sensitive content, trade secrets, or proprietary business information is involved? So to address this clearly, it's useful to distinguish between two separate scenarios. The first scenario is the open consumer-level use of AI through a free chatbot interface. At this level, there is no control over the data being shared with the AI system. Now, some AI providers explicitly notify users that their interactions may be used to train and improve future models. However, when we discuss using generative AI for machine translation, we are not referring to this type of use. What we are talking about here is a professional environment, okay? In a professional context, the standard practice is to access the AI engine directly rather than through its consumer interface. And this is done via APIs. An API, or application programming interface, is a set of rules that allows different software applications to communicate and share data with each other. So when operating through APIs, the conditions are fundamentally different. AI providers themselves designate API access as a confidential professional environment. For instance, when using the OpenAI API, the provider guarantees compliance with the European Union General Data Protection Regulation for users that are operating from Europe, of course, but also with the California Consumer Privacy Act for users in California. And in addition, these providers hold recognized security certifications, including the ISOs covering information security management, security of cloud services, protection of personal data in the cloud, privacy information management, and so on. So in a professional environment today, AI providers offer these guarantees in the same way that services such as Gmail or Google Workspace provide data protection assurances to their business users. But I would like to say that beyond California, over 20 US states have now enacted privacy laws that govern how companies can collect and use personal data, including data processed through AI tools. States such as Texas, Colorado, Virginia, and Connecticut have established protections that give consumers greater control over their information. And for you as a client, this means that depending on where you or your end users are located, additional safeguards may apply to how your content is handled when AI is involved in the translation process. It's also worth noting a recent example from New York. In late 2025, New York enacted a law requiring that advertisements using AI-generated human images clearly disclose this to the public. Importantly, though, the law specifically exempts AI used for language translation. This is a recognition at the legislative level that translation is a distinct and professional use of this technology. At the federal level in the US, no single comprehensive AI law currently exists. However, reputable AI providers typically go beyond what any individual state requires, committing to practices such as not using your submitted content to train their models and deleting data after a set period. As a professional translation provider, reviewing these commitments is part of the due diligence that we handle on your behalf, of course. Another significant recent development in the field is the European Union Regulation 2024/1689, commonly known as the EU AI Act. In addition to defining what artificial intelligence is, the regulation introduces a number of disclosure obligations. First, users must be informed when they are interacting with an AI system that does not make it obvious. And similarly, audio, video, or images that have been artificially altered must be clearly labeled as such. But the obligation most relevant to our field concerns AI-generated text, and it comes into effect on August 2nd of this year. When content of public interest, such as medical leaflets, safety instructions, or contracts, have been translated using AI, the end recipient must be informed. There is, however, an important exception. Translations that have been produced through the machine translation with post-editing process, that is, machine translations that have then been reviewed and refined by a human professional, are not subject to this disclosure requirement. But even with all of these regulations in place, there might be clients who will explicitly demand that their translations are done only by humans. During the webinar on this topic presented by two of my colleagues for the European market, one of the attendees recalled a situation with one of her clients. So this client had threatened to sue her and any other party involved in the translation they had requested if it was discovered that AI had been used at any of the steps of the process, either translation, review, or QA. Now, this attendee made it clear that the client had specified that a fully human process should be used for the project, and that's what they had done. But yet the client felt the need to express that legal consequences were on the table in case their instructions were not followed, right? And last but not least, as one of the neighbors of the US, we have Mexico. Now, the picture here is somewhat different. The country does have a data privacy law, which is the federal law on the protection of personal data held by private parties, which was significantly updated in March 2025. Now, while the law does not mention artificial intelligence explicitly, it does apply to any processing of personal data, which could include processing carried out using AI tools. But one notable institutional change accompanies this reform. The independent regulatory body that previously oversaw data protection, known by its Spanish acronym INAI, was dissolved, and its responsibilities were transferred to the newly created Secretariat of Anti-Corruption and Good Governance, which is a government ministry that reports directly to the executive branch. And this shift has raised some questions about regulatory independence going forward. But on the AI regulation side, Mexico does not yet have a comprehensive AI law, though several proposals are currently moving through Congress. The most ambitious would introduce a risk-based classification system for AI. It's similar in spirit to the EU AI Act, and it would impose obligations around data governance, transparency, and human oversight. But one proposal that is particularly relevant to our field would protect voice actors and dubbing professionals from having their voices cloned or replaced by AI without their explicit consent and fair compensation. And we believe that this is a clear signal that legislators are beginning to think carefully about the professional implications of AI in language-related work, not just translation, but the broader ecosystem of linguistic services. And well, for translation professionals and their clients, the practical takeaway is this. Mexico is in a transitional moment. The data protection framework is in place and applies to AI-assisted workflows, but specific AI regulation has not been yet enacted. In the meantime, the same principle that applies in the United States holds here. Working with a professional provider who reviews AI output, maintains clear data processing agreements, and monitors the evolving regulatory landscape is the most reliable way to ensure both quality and compliance, of course.
Thank you for that explanation, Tania. Okay, now looking at all of this, one thing is clear. When AI works well in translation, the same things are always in place. There is a professional process, clear terminology, good controls, and a human checking the work. Also, not all tools work equally well for all language pairs. As we have said during this webinar, machine translation is not the problem. When used in the right way, it can bring real value. But there is a key difference between using AI occasionally and using it as a part of a well-organized professional process. That difference is what decides the quality of the result. When machine translation is used professionally, you have control over the terms used, the content stays consistent, information is handled safely, and there is a clear plan for when to use AI and when not to. This does not depend only on the tool. It depends on how the process is set up. Because of this, more and more companies are no longer asking if they should use AI. They are asking how to use it without losing control. That is where a specialist partner can help, not to replace what is already working, but to make sure it keeps working well. And to end this, now we would love to hear from you. How are you handling these challenges? What difficulties you are facing? And we are happy to answer any questions. You can join by turning on your microphone or by writing in the chat.
Yes, it would be lovely to hear from you if you have had any experiences regarding AI translations with, I don't know, any of your own clients or with another translator provider.
Actually, hi, my name is Leticia.
Hi,
And
Leticia.
actually, in my company, we don't have any translator. And basically, us, we talk in Spanish all the time. And with our clients, they do it too. So we don't have any AI translator right now. The company is developing some AI intelligence by themselves. So maybe that could be the tool for us in the future.
Yeah, probably. I mean, AI is becoming increasingly important, and it's becoming part of so many types of workflows. But as we mentioned before, even when companies develop their own AI solutions, it is super important that they have professionals in that specific field behind it, right? Like, for instance, here, there must be linguists involved to develop an AI tool that is going to handle translations, for instance, right?
I agree with you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi there, Juliana speaking.
Hi, Juliana.
A quick just question, because I'm in the language industry, actually in a German automotive company, and we do have our own like internally developed NMT as well, but we still use, AI as well, but then always have a professional, like you were saying, professional AI process, right? Like MTPE workflow process. And I was curious if you have realized a mark of like when you use a CAT tool, right? Like Trados or Cross MemoQ, whatever, when you have fuzzy matches, at what point of fuzzy match or context percentage does it make sense to switch to MT versus keeping content from the TM? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question and a very important one. I mean, and that's why we keep saying that humans must be in the loop all the time, right? I believe that even as a translator myself, when all these tools came along, I have been a translator for like almost 20 years. And when all these tools came along, I believe that there was kind of like a shift in trust. I mean, like, who is a translator trusting it more, themselves or the machine? Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's happening a little bit what's happening with AI text. It's influencing the way in which we actually write and speak nowadays. I don't know if you have noticed. So I think that we need to keep as linguistic professionals, we need to keep a very clear division between what the machine is doing and what we can do as humans, right? That said, I don't know, I would say don't go lower than, I would say, perhaps an 80% or something. But a human has to be there to see if that is actually convenient, you know? Translation memories are huge help because the translation have been previously validated. But then again, maybe that validation was not adequate, or things have changed, right? The context has changed or something like that. So I would say that we cannot rely fully on the on machine translation or AI generated translation, although it's great help. I don't know if I actually answered your question, but
No, that was great. Yeah, no, for
yeah.
sure. Yeah, but maybe just a follow-up question to that, to piggyback off that. Are you in your company also using AI in terms of terminology work to like actually help clean up the translation memory, or like how is your AI used with specifically terminology?
Yeah. We are actually doing that. We have this tool called LinguaScrub, which helps actually cleaning TMs, looking for duplicated terms, and all of these little bugs that tend to get in the translation memories. We are also developing another tool to extract glossaries from already existing TMs, and it has been working pretty well, actually. We just did this trial with one of our clients, translation memory from English into French, and the glossary came out pretty well. Of course, we had it reviewed by a professional linguist, and it's been of great help. It has helped improve our processes, make them faster, but always with close supervision.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks to you. Very nice questions. Anyone else? If you want to join in the chat, that's also possible. We will also make this presentation available to you if you want to. And if you have any follow-up questions, or if there's anything like more technical that you would like to know about, you can also contact us, and we can get you in touch with our technical team. And I think there's someone. Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Joaquin. It's so nice to see you here.
Nice to meet you, Tania.
Nice to meet you, Joaquin.
Good to see
Nice
you
to meet
all.
you.
And thank you for the presentation. I have a random question that.
Yeah.
So because of the World Cup going on right now, I saw something very strange happening yesterday. For example, there was this Dutch player. He plays for a team in Spain. He speaks perfect Spanish. I know that. So he was asked a question by a Spanish language station, right? And he was going to answer in Spanish, and someone intervened. No, you got to talk in English, right? So my question is, because all this political landscape and all this, what is going on, I don't need to describe what is going on. Have you faced situations in which this kind of situation is affecting the amount of work that the offerings and this kind of thing, because somehow English is being imposed and like the main language in the world? Or are you seeing more work because of how important is Spanish because of reggaeton or whatever? So how do you see as a company the landscape? Is more, is less? That's the question.
I love that question. As a language nerd, I love the question. Okay, I would say that this situation has shifted. Like sometimes there's more work, sometimes there is less work. But I would separate these two phenomena from each other. I mean, I would separate the fact that English has become some sort of lingua franca and the use of AI. Yeah. So English, for a long time has become this universal language, or whatever you want to call it. We can go into very sociological analysis here, and we can talk about prestigious languages versus not prestigious one in terms of what is more useful to the capital, right? But I would say that we have also moved forward in terms of linguistic rights. And I can see that in how the US, for instance, has at least some of the states have enacted these regulations that require specific content to be translated into Spanish, because that's, I believe, is the second most spoken language in the US.
Yes.
And so even though we have this thing with English, we have come up with protections for other languages. More translations have been required because of that. Interpreters are being hired because of that. However, then we have this AI phenomena, of course. And then it comes this question of, will AI replace human translators or interpreters? In my opinion, I don't think it can fully replace us, but it can displace us, if that makes sense. We are now doing some other type of things instead of, doing the actual craft of translating. We are training the engines. We are, refining the models and all of that. But if we're not careful, it's going to become a very, how do you call it? Like an endogamic system. And then we're going to end up with some messy type of, texts going around. So I would say, yes, we have seen more work in terms of these requirements of, you need to translate this content into these and these languages. But also we have seen less work in terms of, no, we are using AI fully, completely, without any humans involved, right?
Thank
I
you.
think also depends there on the language pair involved. Like we say, some language is easier, like translating from English into Spanish is like really common and really easy for us. Mexico and USA is the language that most of the people already talk both language, and it's easier to work with those languages than maybe a language from Africa or less common language.
Less spoken around the world. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for that question, Joaquin. I could write a dissertation on that. Well, I think that we have gone over our 45-minute mark. And I just want to say that I was very nervous, but I really appreciate all of you being here. It's nice to see some familiar names in the attendees list. And once again, if you have any questions, any follow-up questions, you can contact us. You can, we have our LinkedIn profile. You can just go and comment there and just engage in the conversation. And well, that's it. We are really glad to have had you here.
We really appreciate you being here, and thank you for your time. We hope this has been very helpful for you. And don't forget to reach us, like Tania mentioned before. And well, hope to keep in touch.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Have a
You
good day
too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.